Viewer discretion advised. What I'm going to be talking about today is super important, but also a little grisly. I want to talk about the impact that terrorism is having around the world on our kids. Now, you know, of course, the kids who are living in the Middle East, in Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan, who are living in the combat zones, obviously they have seen a lot more than little kids should see, and they have been affected by it. But did you know that ISIS is even making kids as young as 5 take a machete to captured prisoners and dismember them? That goes beyond horrific. Let me tell you the story of this family. There was a family of 4 children, and the the ISIS militant took the 3 oldest ones, and he made them dismember a prisoner. And by telling them, each one, you cut off a foot, you cut off an arm, and you slash his face with a knife. Otherwise, I'll take you away from your mother and kill you all. So he threatened them. And the sister said, we were scared to refuse. We were each given a machete. I had to cut his hand off. I did it. Then one of the brothers had to cut his feet off. He did it. And then this brother, Shadi, he was 5 years old. He had to cut the prisoner's face with a knife. And it seemed that when he stabbed the prisoner in the eye, the prisoner died. Well, needless to say, this was a traumatic event for Shadi. And the result of it was that he then took a knife to his little sister's throat. Later on, he took a knife, and the older sister said he would have cut her ear off if my mother hadn't stopped him. And he said, I'll cut her throat, she's mine. Now, needless to say, little 5-year-old kids most 5-year-old kids do not take knives to their little sister's ears. And he wouldn't have either, had it not been that he had been so traumatized by the ISIS militant telling him and making him take it to the face of this prisoner, and seeing his siblings dismember the prisoner because they were terrified too not to. Now, it horrifies me because I think right away about how many psychiatrists it would take to take care of this little boy and children like him. There aren't enough psychiatrists in the world to be paired 24/7 with each of these kids for enough time that they need to be able to get over this trauma, to process the trauma. I mean, they'll never forget it, of course, but it can have a tendency to make people go on and repeat these things because it's called identifying with the aggressor. That the little kids are terrified of these ISIS militants and they want to feel as powerful as they are, and so they think they have to do these things. Also, the ISIS instructs them to do these things. This little boy also almost burned the family's tent down because ISIS had told him to do that. So, needless to say, this is a horrendous problem of incredible magnitude. But it's not just in the Middle East that this is a problem. It's a problem in America too, and around the world in a different way. There is a new, well, we have just heard of it new in America, something called the Blue Whale Challenge. And it is essentially like terrorist radicalization of homegrown terrorists. It is a radicalization of teens, getting them to commit suicide. And the reason why teens and homegrown terrorists, people who ultimately search the internet and become radicalized, the similarity is that both of those populations are feeling lonely, lost, depressed, confused, and as if there's no hope. It's hopeless. There's no point in going on. Because when teens these days look at the world that they're coming into, where they have to deal with terrorist attacks as well as other things, more personal kinds of things, it's overwhelming to them. And they are very vulnerable to being radicalized, so to speak, to kill themselves, just like the terrorists radicalize people to then go out and become suicide bombers. Let me tell you more about the Blue Whale Challenge. It started a few years ago in Russia by a young man called Philippe Boudoukin, And he was a former psychology student in university until the university kicked him out. He had psychological problems before then. He grew up having psychological problems, notably because his mother would leave him at 5 in the morning and not come home till late at night to give him dinner. He was an outcast, but what he did was he used the knowledge that he learned as a psychology student to form this game, which is a kind of brainwashing. It is 50 tasks. He first gets kids, sucks kids into this, who he thinks are the most vulnerable. He goes to different groups on the internet and finds the kids who he thinks will be the most vulnerable to his challenge, to his game, his so-called game. And he then gives them one challenge at a time, such as the first one would be to carve a certain symbol into your arm. And then you have to take a picture of it and show it to the administrators of this game. With each of these 50 tasks, you have to show them, prove to them that you have done it in some way. You have to, usually it's pictures or videos, and you have to show them, prove to them that you are ready to go on to the next task. And obviously this is a malicious and sick so-called game. He is now in prison, by the way. And what's even sadder and sicker is that there are girls who are sending him love letters in prison. Now, of course, a lot of this has to do with, especially for girls, it has to do with not having attention from, well, for boys and girls, not having enough attention and love from their parents. But also, for girls, it's when their father is somewhat absent and they're not getting enough attention from a man, and they are particularly susceptible to a man like Philip, before he was put in jail, doing this game. You know, here's a man paying attention to them. So, what does this mean? It means, first of all, that parents do need to spend a lot more attention, a lot more time with their kids. It means that they need to spend more time looking at what kids are looking at on the internet, kids of all ages, what kinds of trouble they can get into on the internet. And it means they need to find more positive things for children of all ages, you know, young kids, teens, to do, so they don't have the time to spend hours searching the internet and getting into trouble. You know, things like playing team sports or enrolling in a drama club, for example. Now, I know what you're thinking, that I'm talking about this because I have a book coming out. It's going to be coming out before 9/11, before the anniversary this year. And it's called Lions and Tigers and Terrorists, Oh My, How to Protect Your Child in a Time of Terror. And you might be thinking, well, I'm just talking about this because I'm biased. Kids really aren't, you know, in that much danger and so on. But they are. And that's why I wrote this book. If parents don't talk to kids about terrorism and explain it in a way that's appropriate and gentle, and but not telling lies, and so that kids can feel less confused and more fortified. Also, that's part of it too. I give parents ways to make their children more resilient. So you need to make your children, your teens, feel as though they're not helpless. They have some power to face the things that they're going to be facing in this world as they grow up. I mean, right now, obviously, and as they grow up. So it's not that I'm talking about these horrible things because I'm promoting my book. I wrote the book because I wanted to provide help for families who are having to face these horrible things.